Hello, I'm Craig and welcome to another episode of Football Kit Memories. Today I meet journalist and broadcaster Sam Delaney. We cover the many thrills and spills of a 20-year career in the media, as well as Sam's own experiences in the world of football. During the show I asked Sam to pick out 3 of his favourite football shirts and tell us a little bit about what they mean to him. There's West Ham, Lazio and England at Italia 90. You can listen to this and other episodes of Football Kit Memories on all major audio platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do subscribe, share, and above all, enjoy the podcast. Okay, so today on the podcast, I'm joined by journalist and broadcaster Sam Delaney. How you doing, Sam?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Happy to be here.
So, mate, you've had quite a storied career in the world of media. I've got a bit of a resume here. You can correct me or tell me if I've missed anything, but I've got print journalism. You've written for The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Big Issue. You were editor of Heat magazine for a little while. You're a published author. You've done TV, you've done radio, and more latterly, you've done podcasting. So you're the co-creator of Top Flight Time Machine with Andy Dawson, and you also do a West Ham podcast called Come On You Irons with The Athletic as well.
Yeah.
It's a pretty long list, mate. You've tried your hand at quite a few different things.
I have, yeah. I have actually. I've been doing it. I think I started work in 97, and I've always I've got a bit of a short attention span. But to be honest, I'm glad because I started out wanting to just be a print journalist. I just wanted to work in magazines. I started when I left university. It was in the era of like Loaded magazine, and right. I'd always been a magazine addict, like an obsessive about magazines. Sort of bloke who just like stacks and stacks of magazines in my house from an early age, and that's all I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to do it for the first few years of my career. But then when other offers or opportunities came out, I always just said yes to anything that sounded like exciting or a laugh. I didn't really ever hesitate to say yes to anything. And I was lucky to get opportunities. But the thing is, for me, I just learned about journalism and being creative and stuff from magazines in an era when magazines were still a really big deal. And all the things I learned from then, I've basically been using ever since, if I'm honest. Right. I'm like, whether I've worked in news, I've worked, on live radio for years. I've worked across different subject matters, from quite serious things like politics or mental health, down to like just daft, frivolous stuff like we do on Top Flight Time Machine or whatever, or lots of football stuff on TalkSport. But I've always sort of had what I call a magazine mentality, which is coming up with like fun ideas that can make any subject, even if it seems quite dry, sort of fun, exciting, compelling. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and that was something that I sort of learned off my mentors in the magazine business. Right. And even though I was only, in that, I still dabble in magazines, but that industry isn't what it once was. But it had a big influence on me, and the people in it are the sort of best people I ever worked with.
Right.
And the stuff I learned, and Andy Dawson, who's my main colleague nowadays, because we devote so much of our time to making Top Flight Time Machine, he'll say the same thing. We didn't actually meet really through magazines, or maybe we did, but we both had grown up loving magazines at opposite ends of the country, round about the same age, and we've both just been magazine obsessives. And still now, even the way we approach doing Top Flight Time Machine, I think the way in which we come up with ideas is entirely informed by our mutual love of the same magazines that we grew up reading. Right. So things like the first year or two of Loaded magazine, when it was not like a lad mag as such. I mean, it was, but not the way we understand that term today. It was like a very smart, well-written, edgy, innovative, brilliant, magazine. And Viz. And I think both of us have the same sort of point of view, and we see it like a magazine. We see that, now magazines, you can't sell magazines now. It's a dying industry, which is a real shame. But I think the spirit lives on because in various ways. But, Andy and I just love it. We both worked in magazines. We both grew up reading them and loving them and studying them like nerds forensically, collecting them. And we still, we approach the show. It happens to be in audio form rather than print form. But the creative sort of approach of it, the mindset of it, the way in which we kind of drive the whole thing is basically based on a magazine.
Right. So kind of which of those mediums, all those mediums you've worked in, which would be the one that you're most comfortable or is your most favourite to work in?
Well, to be honest, I've always enjoyed writing. That was my only. I never for one moment thought when I was, a kid or whatever, that I was going to one day be on TV or radio or doing any of that stuff. I just wanted to write. I wanted to be writing in the magazines that I loved. I used to love like I loved to smash hits when I was a kid, and then I kind of graduated to the Face and loved that. And then when Loaded came out, that was like a mind-blowing thing. And I wanted to write stuff like that about pop culture or just the lives that me and my mates lived in a sort of funny and, trying to be funny but intelligent and real. And that's all I wanted to do. And I still love writing. But I mean, I write about different things now, but I absolutely love it. And the other things, they just presented themselves to you because print, I didn't realize this when I went into it, but print has always been a sort of an avenue to other opportunities in the media, such as broadcast,
a gateway drug.
It was a gateway drug. And, when you start getting offers like that, one, it appeals to your ego and vanity because you can say to your mum, I'm going to be on the box, right? Yeah. And two, in those days, at least, it usually paid more,
right?
But the main thing about all of it, and for a while I worked in digital. Like for a few years, I ran all of the digital content. I was head of content at Comedy Central in the UK, and that was all digital stuff. It was like creating and commissioning comedy for their online platform.
Yeah.
So I've done that sort of stuff as well. But the thing is, if you take all the the creative bollocks out of it that I've been talking about, in terms of career and making a living, you got to make a living.
Yeah.
And if I'd just stuck to print, I probably would have got into a lot of sticky situations. I mean, I have been in sticky situations, haven't we all? But what I mean is, I'm grateful today that I did say yes to all these opportunities that came my way. Yeah. I had mates in the print business, in the magazine business, who used to say to me when I first started going off and doing all these other things, they used to call me a whore, right? They go, you fucking whore, you go and do everything. Like tongue in cheek, you know. And I didn't care that they said that. I thought it was funny. I was like, yeah. I mean, what do you want me to be? Like loyal to one particular niche of journalism, right? Yeah, if someone's ringing me up and saying, I know you get paid 150 quid a day for writing on that magazine, but we will pay you £500 a day to come and just do like an afternoon in a TV studio, reading out a script off an auto cue that some other dickhead's written. Right? I go, yeah, all right.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, mate, I've got one more question I wanted to ask you about your career before we start talking about some football shirts. You're the kind of you've got a lot of really funny celebrity anecdotes. You met a lot of famous people over the years, and what I wanted to ask you is, which celebrity or famous person has been the biggest kind of surprise to you? Did you have maybe a preconceived notion and you've met them and that preconceived notion was completely wrong, either negative or positive?
That's a really good question. Yeah, people always think that, what people usually want is who's the worst celebrity. And I don't really have as much as I would like in terms of, that person is a complete bastard. Which I always get the impression people want me to reveal that, because I've noticed that those are the sort of stories that people love to exchange.
I see.
They love to, especially if it's about someone who has a nice reputation.
Yeah.
And they go, apparently, my mate's a journalist and he met them, and apparently in real life that person's a complete dickhead and a bastard. But unfortunately I don't have many stories to tell like that. And even if I did, I kind of think people base assumptions about famous people sometimes on the tiniest amount of evidence. Like I might have met someone. I met Tom York once, right? I interviewed him when I was working at ITN on 5 News. I was a reporter and I was doing a report about the Stop the War campaign.
Right.
And Tom York was quite heavily involved in that. So I got to go down and interview him and a couple of other members of Radiohead. And I was delighted by that because I love Radiohead and him. And he was a nightmare. He was just really difficult. He had that whole kind of all journalists are bad You're all bastards. You're all contributing to all of this terrible thing.
Right.
And I don't know. On that day, he seemed to be like one of these conspiracy theorists who thought that the media were, involved in all of the worst things. But do you know what? That was one day I met him, and it was probably a very emotional time because we were going to war, and a lot of people felt angry and passionate about that. Or he might have just woken up miserable that day. I'd hate to think that I'm sure you would hate to think that anyone had met you on your worst day.
Exactly.
And that was the only time they'd met you. And then they were going around just defining you. And those stories spread because people love to tell stories that they think are insightful about celebrities. Yeah. They love it. They go, wow, I know you think he's a nice guy, but I bumped into him in Sainsbury's once. And, and he was a nightmare because he took ages bagging up his food. And I was just sat there having to wait. And people love to retell these tiny stories about people. So anyway, sorry if that disappoints you. I tell you one thing that I was thinking about the other day was that I'm delighted to have, got to know Shaun Ryder quite well, which is amazing when you get to know someone who was genuinely one of your bona fide heroes when you were a kid. So Shaun Ryder was a hero and a role model to me when I was like about 16. and I was thinking the other day that since I've got to know him, I gave up drink and all the other stuff, drugs and everything about coming up for 6 years ago.
Okay.
And I realized I didn't really get to know Shaun until after that, but it had never really crossed my mind before. So I thought, this guy who is one of the country's most legendary hedonists, right? His whole reputation is built on getting out of it. And if I'm honest, that's probably one of the things that made him appeal to me when I was a teenager.
Right.
My friendship with him has had, on my part at least, no drugs or drink involved with it whatsoever.
Right.
And he's well aware of the fact he's always shown quite an interest in my sobriety. Do you know what I mean? But it's just not really an issue whatsoever. And I often think a lot of people come to me and go, Sam, you don't drink or anything like that. How do you deal with the boredom? And I always go, mate, I am never bored. I am never boring. And, one great thing to say is that, look, since I got sober, I've become mates with Shaun Ryder, mate. So it obviously sobriety doesn't hinder you. Exactly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And no one's bothered. If he's not bothered, then no one's going to be.
Exactly. Dispelling the myth entirely. Wow. So, mate, you've picked out 3 football shirts that we're going to talk about today. And before we get on to your first one, what I wanted to ask you is, what, if anything, do football shirts mean to you in general?
I love football shirts. Always have, I guess, from an early age. I think it's one of the things that first gets you into football. You collect Panini stickers and you study the kits, don't you? It's what makes sticker albums so amazing that you turn from one spread to the other, and on each page you're confronted with this consistent sort of beautiful array of shirts, or this sort of uniform kind of aesthetic across 2 pages on a Panini sticker album, and you study all of them. And I think, I think that might be one of the things. I definitely think Panini sticker albums were what got me really into football in a massive way, because I think before you start watching the actual games, you obsess first over the other stuff, like the players' names, the kits, what country they're from, what their stats are, all of that sort of thing. And then after that, you slowly start to actually watch the game itself a bit more.
Yeah.
And I think kits are a huge part of that, learning the kits, learning the colours. And then when I got older, I remember, like I said earlier, I used to be really into the Face magazine, which was like a sort of portal into this cool world of clubland that, I was too young to be a part of, but I read the magazine and felt like I was sort of like voyeuristically enjoying it. And I treated it like a Bible, right? I just thought anything that was ever in it was the epitome of cool. And football had been a bit of a problem because I was really into football. It was my first passion from a young age. But in the 80s, especially, it became deeply uncool. People forget that now.
Right.
But when you're at school, and I was at a normal comprehensive school, but even there, if you wanted to be in with, the coolest kids and the arty kids or the kids who were really into music, basically the ones who hung around with the prettiest girls.
Yeah.
Being into football was not really, because it was during time of hooliganism and the European ban, and wasn't something you bang on about. So, but I always was into it, and I was always going to West Ham from a young age, but it wasn't something you talked about a huge amount to certain people. And then I remember seeing in the face around the end of the 80s, towards 1990, when Italia 90 sort of had quite a big effect. I remember seeing like they had a fashion shoot, but with blokes and girls wearing continental football shirts in the shoot, like AC Milan or Barcelona, or international shirts like Argentina.
Yeah.
And I thought, fucking hell, that's brilliant. And foreign shirts were harder to come by then. And there was soccer scene in Carnaby Street.
Carnaby, yeah, loved it.
But other than that, there wasn't all the websites and stuff. So it just seems so exotic and rare. And suddenly they're saying, oh yeah, people have started. This article said people have started wearing like continental football shirts to clubs now. And again, I was too young to be going to these clubs, but I was like, fucking hell, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I had this Barcelona shirt that my brother had brought back from Spain for me, and I dug it out because it was quite old, but it still just about fit me. So I started wearing it like out with my mates, and it took a while for them to get their heads around it. They're like, they probably didn't read the face. Do you know what I mean? They're like, what the fuck are you wearing a Barcelona shirt for, you dickhead, when you're out at a party on Saturday night? And I probably was a dickhead, but yeah, basically I, like you, and I'm sure all of your guests, what's the word? Fetishized them quite a lot from an early age.
Yeah. So actually that brings us quite nicely onto the first shirt you picked from a time when football was quite uncool, like you say. And it's the West Ham home shirt between 83 and 85 by Adidas.
Yeah. So it's quite, I think it's a pretty iconic kit. It's, because it's got the blue hoop across the sort of middle of it, large blue hoop that had our first ever shirt sponsor written inside the hoop, which was Avco Trust. I think originally it said Avco Trust.
Right.
Not quite sure what they were. I think they're an insurance firm or something. And then it changed to just Avco, and it's quite iconic because until then, I mean, West Ham's. Every team has a traditional shirt, don't they? And then they dick around with it sometimes, right? But West Ham shirts really should be claret body, blue sleeves, white shorts, right? But once in a while they dick around, and this was the first little bit of dicking around there'd been on the home shirt for quite a few years, because suddenly there was this big hoop across it. Don't think anyone had really done a single hoop before that I'm aware of. Apart from, the hooped clubs. We're not a hooped club. Celtic and QPR are hooped clubs, and so I just thought it looked really cool. But the main thing is it was the first West Ham shirt I owned. I think before that, my brother, one of my other brothers, I've got three brothers, one supports West Ham, the other two support other clubs, but my West Ham supporting older brother had like given me old ones of his that I'd had put on that were too big for me or whatever. But the first one that I'd had as a gift bought for me, which I think was on maybe my 9th birthday. But I've got some great pictures that I treasure of my 9th birthday party at my mum's house, where she still lives, of me and all my mates. We had a football match at the local rec, Dogshit Park, as it was known. And then back to my mum's for a proper, tea party. We had hot dogs and then jelly and ice cream. And it famously descended into a massive food fight, like proper food fight that still old mates of mine still talk about to this day.
Yeah, inside the house.
Yeah, and I've got photos of just before it kicked off, because we're all there, and about 3 of us are in West Ham shirts, and there's a couple of Spurs, and I think there might be a Rogue Man U in it or something like that. But the shirts all look so mint. I've got a couple of pictures from that day, and they look so mint. You're so chuffed to have original pictures of yourself in those old shirts.
What's the deal with you in West Ham then? Where does that come from? Is that a family thing, or did you grow up around there or something?
No, neither of those. I'm from West London.
Oh, right.
So I'm from the opposite side of London. It's not a family thing really, although I do have an older brother who's West Ham fan who obviously would have been a big influence on it. But my oldest brother's a Spurs fan. I've got another brother who's a QPR fan, which would have been our local team. I mean, we grew up on the estate that the Griffin Park, Brentford's ground, is pretty much on, right? So it's pretty much attached to the estate. So we couldn't have been more local to Brentford. So by rights, I should have been a Brentford fan. They've always been kind of my second team.
Right.
And But my best mate who lived on this estate a few doors down, Alex Jones, his dad, Malcolm, who was sort of like the toughest, coolest bloke on the estate, who looked a bit like Mike Reed from EastEnders and had like, you know, always wore a cool leather jacket and drove a sports car.
Nice.
And was just an impressive geezer. He, you know, he was from Bethnal Green, I think. He was from the East End and had moved here when he got married, and he was just a big influence. I didn't live with my dad. My dad wasn't around. I mean, I had a relationship with him, but he didn't live with us.
Right.
And he's a Spurs fan, really, my dad, but he wasn't particularly a partisan sort of guy. He kind of loves football, but wasn't one of those guys who go on in a big way about club rivalries. He kind of doesn't like that, actually. Right. And, you know, and understandably, I mean, I've got so into, you know, that kind of just being so passionate about your club and hating other clubs. It's unhealthy. I realise that now.
Yeah.
So I should have listened to my dad. But no, but Malcolm Jones was a big influence because he was just sort of an impressive bloke. And my best mate at the time was Alex Jones, and he just got us into West Ham, and I think he took us. And then we made some other mates at our school in West London, weirdly, where most people were either Spurs fans, because at that time, even though we were in West London, Spurs, it was like when they won 2 FA Cups in a row, and they had Ardiles and Hoddle. So they were like a sort of a trendy team to support. And then a lot of people supported like Liverpool and things like that. But there was like a little collection of about 4 of us who were really good mates at primary school and all started supporting West Ham. I think because this one kid and his dad influenced the rest of us.
Oh, wow.
And then we started to go quite young. So the respective dads of my other mates, who were all had quite big influence on me, would take us for whether it was someone's birthday or a special treat, take the group of us all the way over to Upton Park. And once we started going, I mean, Upton Park, I know everyone thinks this about their own home ground.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not completely biased because I totally don't think that about our current stadium. I think it's that whatever the opposite of an atmosphere is, that's what it's got. But Upton Park was a very special place. And especially when you're a kid, when you go there, there was such a distinctive image, a distinctive atmosphere, vibe and aesthetic about it. There was a slight menace that you found quite exciting at that age. And I think we were just captivated.
So that shirt wasn't a particularly successful one. I look at the seasons, because when you first mentioned, I did a bit of research. I assumed that you'd have picked the one that they came third in the league in, which was the
yeah. Well, I nearly chose that, and then I thought, well, talking about that season when West Ham, you know, came quite close to winning the league it's a real chestnut for West Ham fans to do.
Right.
I can see how it almost feeds into other fans' cynical depiction of us, because it's like our most glorious moment that we love banging on about is one time we finished fucking third in the old first division. I mean, it's pretty sad, really.
So should we move on? We've got a bit of a watershed moment, I guess, in English football, British football. It's the England Umbro shirt at Italia 90.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I touched on earlier, football, you know, it's a cliche, but it's true. Football had been through the doldrums and football wasn't particularly cool. And Italia 90 seemed to be a moment at which that changed because for various reasons, you know, there's something about a World Cup in Italy that just feels right. You know, a World Cup in Italy or a World Cup in Brazil, there's something about those countries where you think, yeah, this is where the World Cup should be. Right.
Yeah.
And so there was something about the atmosphere of it being in a country that is so football obsessed, but where football plays a different role very different role in society to the one it plays in Britain. You know,
definitely.
It's so much more. It's kind of got a sophistication and a style about it, just naturally that English football has never and probably will never have. Right.
Yeah.
And there was something very captivating about that. You started seeing it covered in the style magazines, like I say, in the build-up. There's a famous cover of The Face with a young Kate Moss, a 16-year-old Kate Moss on the front cover.
Right.
wearing a football scarf in the style of the kind of Italian ultra. And there was all these different things surrounding Italia 90 that kind of took the nasty edge off of football as a sort of a place of fear and violence and nastiness and drunkenness and skinheads and racism and all those other bad connotations.
Yeah.
And it changed it. And I'd been around all of that. I'd been going to West Ham since I was a small kid. And I'd been to various other football grounds as well. I was sort of, if I wasn't at West Ham at home, if West Ham were away, I'd be at Loftus Road or Griffin Park a lot of the time. Okay. You know, and so I'd always been at football throughout that period, and I knew that the ugly side of it. And I wasn't one of these people who was sort of like, you know, there is something. I don't go dewy-eyed about the days when people were throwing fucking golf balls with nails in at your head, right? I'm not one of those people, but at the same time, there was a particular kind of an atmosphere at football that no longer exists that I do. Yeah, I do. I kind of mourn it slightly. Yeah, I mean, Italia 90 during that era, for all those reasons I've said, it became cooler. And actually, this England shirt is quite a cool shirt as well. You know, it looked more continental. It was baggy, which was the continental style at the time. And most English football shirts were still sort of rather tighter. I mean, tights back in now. But at that time, baggy was how the Italians would wear their shirts, right? And it was baggier, this shirt. It had a collar, which was cool. Again, now I prefer collarless ones, but it had an actual collar. I don't know, but it seemed to be quite different to previous England shirts. It seems to be less plain than previous England shirts. And you know, and then obviously the England team itself as well. You went from being a team you kind of thought of Mark Hateley, Terry Butcher. And those kind of players of it just being and the sort of team that kind of never had the balls to build the side around Glenn Hoddle like we should have done. And had we done, we might have won the World Cup in 1986. So like when every other successful team in the world built their team around one number 10. And if you're lucky enough to have a genius number 10, then you're in with a chance. England were the only country in the world who had a genius number 10, but either didn't play him at all or played him like on the wing or something like that. If England had just committed and said, this team is about Glenn Hoddle, we might have won the World Cup. But then suddenly Bobby Robson, and there's all these different stories about what happened. There was a mutiny amongst the players and all that stuff. Bobby Robson, after a couple of pretty turgid games, has gone, actually, just overnight, I'm going to turn us into a continental side. I'm going to play with a sweeper. I'm going to play Gaza. Right, and Peter Beardsley, and Chris Waddle, and John Barnes, and Gary Lineker, just pure glamorous, classy. Well, I'm not sure if you can call Chris Waddle and Peter Beardsley glamorous, but you know what I mean. Like, I mean, think of that team though. What an amazing collection of players. Like, he played Mark Wright as sweeper, which was mad. Because you know, sweepers in our minds then were, you know, the ultimate sweeper would have been like Baresi, right? Mm-hmm. And Mark Wright was just looked like a big lump, played for like Southampton, big ginger bloke. And he got converted to a really brilliant sweeper overnight. Yeah. And Paul Parker had come through. He was amazing. Des Walker looked like arguably the best defender in the tournament. Stuart Pearce still meant that we still had. And then there was injuries like, you know, so Brian Robson had to go home. But that gave David Platt a chance to come into the team. Yeah. And I mean, what an amazing team. And they just looked the business in these cool shirts. And I went to try and get one, but I think it was like the day after we'd beaten Belgium. We beat Belgium in like the second round, the first knockout stage. And suddenly the country got gripped by England fever. Like a lot of tournaments, people start going, fucking England, I can't be bothered. I don't even want them to win. They're rubbish. Bobby Robson's an idiot. And then suddenly you have a couple of good results and you're all like, come on, England, we're going to win it. And we went out, me and two mates went out to Soccer Scene on the Saturday because there was a game that night. And I said, right, we've got to go up to Soccer Scene and get some shirts. And we went to get that. And Soccer Scene was a smaller shop on Carnaby Street on a corner, right, at the Great Marlborough Street end of it. And then eventually it moved into bigger premises up the road. But at this stage, it was just a small corner shop and it was fucking chaos. It wasn't all ordered. It was just like loads of mad shirts piled everywhere. And some
with a long stick to get them off the top row.
Yes, exactly. And only the people who worked there knew where everything was. So you had to ask them and then they'd go and see, not like you go into a shop now and everything's neatly laid out. And it was this day, it was a hot Saturday. in June or July, whatever, and people, it was fucking a frenzy in there. We got the tube up to the West End, went into this shop, and it was like madness. Everyone, like, when you see like sales, or like now in COVID, people fighting over toilet rolls, it was like that. And I remember like fighting my way to the front and going, "Oh, we've got the England shirts in my size," and they only had the red one, which I don't. I like a red England shirt, and a lot of people prefer it because it's what we won the World Cup in. But I really wanted that white one, but I didn't get my hands on it. I got the red one.
Right.
That's all I have had. But I've chosen for these purposes the white one because that's the one that sticks out in my mind, the one that I really love.
So where do you stand on the club versus country stuff? Do you get caught up in the whole England thing at tournaments, or is West Ham always more important for you?
Oh yeah, I mean that just doesn't compare. I mean, increasingly the older I get, I'm not even into football. I'm just into West Ham. It's just like an illness, isn't it? The club. I mean, I'm just sort of like, I wish I wasn't even into West Ham, but they've got me by the balls. I mean, there's other things I could be doing. I'd rather just be reading loads of books and improving my mind. But unfortunately, West Ham got me by the balls. But yeah, football's just, I'm just a bit of an old grump about football now. Is it, it's silly. We always say on Top Flight Time Machine, it's a child's game. Even though we started out as a football podcast, we always go, never forget. Like we see things like those clips of the Arsenal TV with these grown men, some of whom look old enough to not just be fathers, but grandfathers, like having aneurysms over losing 1-0, to someone. Yeah. And you just sort of think, fucking hell, mate, this is a child's game. This is a game with some men running around after a bag of air. For fuck's sake, grow up. England, I couldn't really give a shit about until we start winning, and then suddenly I'll be really into it. So I'm an awful fair weather fan when it comes to England. I used to be obsessed with England when I was a kid. Yeah, I always preferred West Ham, but I used to be so excited about him. Now I just and I think most people in my generation, couldn't give a shit about England in comparison to their club. But I'm a terrible fair weather fan. Like when Southgate's team stumbled through to the semi-finals.
It's a good way of describing it.
Really flukily, because we got the easiest route to the semis ever. Then we had a really easy semi that we still lost. Do you know what I mean? So, but at the time, I remember when we'd beaten, was it Sweden we beat in the quarters, I think? We beat, or it was either Sweden or Colombia. I can't remember which way round it came. I think it was we beat Sweden. I think we beat Colombia first, then we beat Sweden. And I remember the day I was with one of my best mates, and we went out to park afterwards with our kids, and we kept looking at each other. Oh my God, mate. It's coming home. Everyone just kept saying to each other that summer, didn't they? It's coming home. It's coming home. It was never coming home. But, not really bothered by England. But if we play in the Euros this year and get beyond the group stage, I'll probably go out and get a 3 lions tattoo or something mad like
that. So, Ray, that's a nice place to move on to your final shirt. So we're going forward a little bit into the 90s now. You picked the Lazio home between, I think, 91 and 93 by Umbro, the Gaza shirt.
Yeah, it's quite similar, actually, to the England shirt, thinking about it, isn't it? It's similar sort. That was obviously the look that Umbro adopted during that era, quite baggy with the collar and a single sort of popper button, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've got the nice kind of imprint as well, which the England one had as well.
So sort of shadowy kind of imprint, yeah. So... I chose this because I when I was growing up, I had cousins who lived in Rome and who I was very close to. So my dad's sister had moved to Rome when she was 16 to work as a nanny, ended up marrying a guy, having kids, raising them as bilingual. But they were really close. My dad and this particular sister was very close. They'd be back and forth all the time. So they would come over to England for large parts of the summer and Christmas, and they spoke fluent English. I didn't speak a word of Italian. And they're about my age. One's exactly my age, and the older one was about 2-3 years older, so I really looked up to him. And they were absolutely encyclopedic with their knowledge of all football, world football.
Wow, okay.
If you were like a football fan in the 80s, you just knew English football. Now, my son, because of FIFA and the internet and YouTube, he knows, he could name you Atletico Madrid's first team, no problem. He probably could name you players playing for Boca Juniors and Santos. That's the way of the young football fan these days. Those days we knew nothing. And also because England weren't in Europe, English clubs weren't in Europe for a lot of the 80s. Right, so you didn't get exposed to these players. But my cousins in Italy, they were, Seriea was the biggest, most glamorous, most brilliant league in the world. All the best players played in it. Platini, Maradona, Rummenigge, all of them. And it was just so impossibly sexy. And they knew everything, not just about that, but they could name all the players who played for Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich. And so they were like football mentors to me. They lived in Rome, and the older one supported Lazio. That was the local club. He supported Lazio. Yeah. His dad supported Lazio. His granddad supported Lazio. And so whenever I went to Rome, I would go and watch Lazio. And so I became a pretty serious Lazio fan. I was like, I've been to Lazio a lot of times. I've been to the Rome derby a couple of times, which is a fucking incredible experience.
Yeah.
And I was pretty seriously into Lazio because I just went and I got caught up with it. My cousin was a serious fan. All of his mates, so half of them were, probably less than half of them, lots of them were Roma fans because in Rome, mainly in the actual city itself, it's Roma. Lazio is more of a suburban team. But anyway, I kind of learned I was just saying, like, there's not enough room for all the hatred in football. But unfortunately, I discovered an extra hatred, which was for Roma, which was just taught to me by my relatives. And it's a pointless hatred for a club like I knew very little about and who were miles away. But I was like, fucking Roma, I'd get like, it was like they were almost as bad as Millwall. Right. So I've been to a lot of games. I think I probably went to my first Lazio game in about 83, 84 when I was about 8 or 9. But by the time it got to the early 90s, Lazio had always been a bit of a mid-table club. But then when it got to the early 90s, they suddenly started becoming better. They weren't quite at the point where they could go for the title yet. But there was still at that stage, there was the 3 foreigner rule that they had in Italy. Right. I don't know if they had it here, but it wouldn't have been relevant because we didn't have any foreign players. But over there, everyone had 3 foreigners. And I think they signed Gaza. And it was amazing because I really liked Gaza, but I grudgingly liked him because he played for Tottenham.
Right.
And my brother's a massive Spurs fan. Theo, he does the Spurs podcast and stuff. And Gaza was like a god to him. And he'd always be going on about it. And I had to always begrudgingly admit, this player is fucking amazing. But I was absolutely gutted he played for Tottenham. So when he signed for Lazio, it was dreamland because I knew he was never going to end up at West Ham. He looked like he was going to be the best player in the world. So the next best thing was he'd go to Lazio because then I could really support him without feeling guilty. So I was so delighted when he signed for Lazio. And one Christmas, my eldest brother Theo bought shirts. Like I said, there's me and 3 other older brothers. So there's 4 of us. And my brother Theo, I think, had probably first started earning decent money. He's 10 years older than me. And on Christmas Day, he handed all 3 of us presents and said, open them at the same time. So we all opened them at the same time. And each of us had that Lazio Gaza shirt from 1991 with Banca di Roma as the sponsor. And I think it was like we were 8, 9, 10, 11. So my one had the number 8 on it.
Oh, wow.
I'm the youngest. And then, so the 3 of us, me and my other 2 brothers, Cass and Dom, both opened these. And we're like, 8, 9, and 10. And then Theo had bought them for us, ripped off his own shirt to reveal underneath that he was wearing the number 11 shirt of Lazio. And we were like, hey! Because it was quite nice. The mutual love of Lazio was quite nice because there's 4 brothers who all support different teams. So 2 of us support West Ham ones, but there's sometimes, it's a shame really because, we all love football, but sometimes there was disputes, so to speak. That is not necessarily, I think, aesthetically the best ever Lazio shirt. In fact, this season, Lazio's away shirt is actually claret and blue, which I'm so delighted by. And I've been strongly resisting the temptation to buy myself one. Because if I bought it, I wouldn't wear it. That's what you do when you get older. You buy football shirts because you just love them. But then when you actually get it, you think, what the fuck am I going to do with this? Do you know what I mean?
So there you have it. Massive thanks to Sam for sharing his football kit memories with me. You can follow me, my own collection on Instagram, or get in touch via Twitter or email. Please do remember to like, subscribe and share. And other than that, I guess that's it. Until next time, I'll see you later.